All right, guys, welcome back. In this lecture, we'll be talking about scoping, right? So generally in VBA, we have two types of scoping. One is the variable scoping, and the other one is the procedural scoping. Okay, so in this video, we'll be talking about variable scoping. Okay, so all I have to tell you guys is make sure that you know the ins and outs of scoping. Okay, be it variable or procedural scoping. This is a fundamental cornerstone of VBA, one that is required for you to develop complex VBA application. Okay, so we'll go through the variable scoping here and the procedural scoping in the upcoming video. So generally speaking, variables. Okay, we have three broad categories of variable. We have the public variable, we have the private variable, and then we also have another private variable, but that's expressed in terms of dim. Okay, so never mind. Okay, let's go through an example. Okay, but there's one thing before I get on even to variable. I have to highlight this fact. Okay, regardless of the variable type, when a workbook, okay, I'll upload this file, okay, in the description section. All right, so don't worry too much about, just pay attention. Okay, just pay attention. All right, it's closed when a workbook is closed or the module is reset. Okay, what I mean by reset is when you hit this reset button. Okay, the module is reset, the values will not. Okay, I'm just gonna. Values will not be retained. Okay, the values will not be retained. Okay, so regardless of the type variable, if you hit reset or you close the workbook and you reopen the workbook, all the values just vanishes. Okay, and then you have to rerun the macro again. Now, let's talk about the first type of variable. Okay, this is a public variable. So what's a public variable? Okay, suppose if we want a variable, okay, that is available in all procedures and all modules. So I have two modules here. So I want this variable to be recognized by all the procedures, not just in this module, but also in all the other modules within this workbook. Okay, all modules within this workbook. Okay, so the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to declare this with the keyword public. Okay, right? Not dim, we're going to use public. Okay, so now if I open a sub procedure, which I'm just going to call variable scoping. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set a value for this, right? Q equals 5, and then I'm going to message box Q. Okay, so remember when I told you that this variable is alive, okay, throughout throughout all the modules and all the procedures within the same workbook, right? Okay, so I'm just going to run this macro. Q equals to 5. Okay, Q equals to 5. All right, so it's run that, it's recognized that. Okay, Q has been registered and called upon. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open the second module, right? I'm going to open a second module, and I'm going to write another procedure in this module. Okay, what I'm going to name this is I'm just going to name this sub variable scoping. Maybe I'm just going to call it second module, right? Just for clarity's sake. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to message box Q. Remember, I had called Q as a public variable, right? Right below the option explicit, okay, above where above where I opened the procedure, okay, it has to be right below the option explicit. Now Q has been called in this procedure. Now I'm going to see if VBA recognizes that Q has been called. Okay, something, right? Let's do it again, right? Let's do it again. F8, okay. Q has been called, right? Q is 5. Let's run this again. And sure enough, Q is 5, okay? So make sure you not hit the reset button, okay? And whatever it is, okay, do not hit the reset button, okay, or close the workbook, okay. And I don't know if you're writing, I think the reason it did not recognize it previously was because maybe I was writing something codes or whatever. Maybe it was a glitch, okay, but whatever the case is, okay, Q has been recognized, okay. Now I could just prove it to you, right? I'm going to change the value of Q to 10, and I'm going to run this. Okay, Q has been recognized as 10, has been called by the variable scoping. Now I'm going to see if it's registered in the second procedure in the other module, and sure enough, Q is 10. Okay. Now, what if we want, okay, we want a variable that is available to all procedures within this workbook. Okay, so same thing, but what we're going to do is we're going to write private. Okay, we're going to use the word private R as long. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to call the value R equals to 15. I'm going to message box R, and then I'm going to open another procedure, okay, on the same module, which I'm just going to call this second procedure. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see when you're writing a second module, see the values get resetted. Okay, so that's another thing for you to be aware of. Okay, so make sure you write all the codes and then you test it. Okay, right. So now message box, otherwise it's going to get reset. Okay, so message box R. Okay, just to prove to you that R is recognized on all the procedures within this module. So if I run the code, 10Q message box R 15. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, make sure you don't hit the reset button. Okay, message box R is 15. You see, R is being recognized. But what if I try to call the value of R onto this procedure in a separate module? Okay, let's run this again. 10, 15, and then I'm trying to call R here. Okay, I'm going to try to call R. Okay, see, variable is not defined. R is not even recognized. So as expected, a private procedure is not recognized outside the module it was declared. Okay, so that's all. Okay, I'm just gonna hit reset, doesn't matter. Okay, all right. Now we have two types of variable that we've covered, public and private. Let's go into the final type of variable, which is the dim, right? That's the normal one that we have been familiarized with. So I'm just gonna say dim as is long, right? As is equals to maybe just 40. Okay, and then I'm going to call message box S. Okay, so the thing about dim is whenever you declare a variable, okay, that you desire for it to only exist within that procedure, right? So we just call it with dim. Dim is the equivalent of private, but dim is used on a procedural level. Private is on a modular level, right? But they function the same. All right? So private, however, right, is available throughout all the procedures within the module, and dim is only available to the procedure where you write it. So dim S is equal to 40. Now I'm just going to message box S, and I'm going to run this. Okay, we're going to run this thing, message box S 40. Okay, now what if I try to call S here, right? Okay, what if I try to call S? We're going to run this again, right? 40. And then I'm going to try to call S. Okay, variable is not defined. Okay, S is not defined. Okay, right? S is not defined, and of course, right? Of course, okay. I'm just gonna have to just click exit. Right, I have to reset the module. Okay, now likewise, S will not be recognized here as well. Okay, so we don't have to run this, alright, because I'm pretty sure, and I hope that you trust me, but nevertheless, we're just gonna prove it. Okay, 40, 40, 10, 15. Okay, so S has been run here. Now we're gonna try to run. Okay, okay, variable R is not defined. Okay, so I'm just gonna okay, never mind. Okay, R is not defined, so S is definitely not going to be get defined as well. Okay, so we can just comment this out, and then we're going to try to run this again. Okay, S is not defined. Okay, S as well is not defined. Right, so I'm just going to uncomment it back. Right, because I'm gonna share this workbook, and I want to make sure that it's clean. Okay, all right. Then the final type of variable. Okay, this is actually a redundant kind of variable. Okay, if you've ever came across the static variable, right? So the static is actually the equivalent of private. Okay, you see, the thing about dim variable is that the dim variable is only available in the procedure where you write it, and once the procedure ends, right? Once the procedure ends, the value dies off as well, right? The value dies off. So suppose S is 40, and then you end the sub, and then you run back again. Okay, you can't get the previous value of the S. Okay, so this is when we use static, right? So we use static. Okay, static is but when I say it's equivalent to private, you'll see that in a minute. Okay, let's just do something with static variable. Okay, okay, I'm just gonna say dim d as, okay, sorry, it's supposed to be static d QRSD, right? We're on D now, okay, as long. Okay, now I'm just going to say D equals to D plus 5. Okay, D equals to D plus 5. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to have another dim here, okay, another dim, okay, okay, dim U as long, and U is equals to U plus 5. Okay, the reason I'm doing this is I want to check if the value is being retained after the module, after the procedure ends. Okay, after the procedure ends. So I'm going to run this. Okay, T is initially 5, right? T equals, okay, so by default, make sure you do not set something like T equals to 0, right? Otherwise, the value is going to get reset. Okay, so you just leave it as T equals to T plus 5. Okay, so T by default is just going to take the value of 5, and then it's not going to get reset to 0. Okay, so T is equals to 5. Okay, I'm just going to message box as well. I forgot to message box these, right? And we're going to message box U. So this is where I'm going to actually highlight to you the setback of dim. Okay, so the thing about dim is that, right, so T is 5, U is 5, okay, T is 5, U is 5. Okay, let's not worry about S and Q, okay, and R. Okay, I'm just gonna comment all of this out, right? Okay, I'm just gonna comment all of this out for the time being. Okay, okay, so we're just gonna worry about T and U. Okay, now we know that T was 5 and U was 5 initially. Now the procedure is ended. Now what if I rerun the procedure? As you could see, T, the previous 5, is being added to another 5. So now it's 10. But you see the U has just been reset back because U, the value is gone, right? As soon as the procedure ends, the value basically dies off, right? So that the 5 value is not recognized from the 5 value from the first iteration when the code ran was not being brought forward on the second iteration, if you get what I mean, right? So why do I say this is redundant? Why do I say static is redundant? Okay, static is redundant because quite simply I can tell you that you can just use private, right? Because remember, private, its value is available to all procedures within the workbook, right? So its value doesn't die off when the procedure ends. Okay, unlike a dim, right? When the procedure ends, the value dies off, right? So for a private, the value is retained even when the procedure ends. So in fact, I could just say something like private R is equals to long. So we're just going to say R. I'm just going to open another private. Okay, I'm just going to have another private. I'm just going to call this private X as long. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have X equals to X plus 5. Okay, so this is private. Okay, what I'm going to do is we're going to run the code. Okay, we're going to run the code. So I'm just going to prove to you that it's the equivalent. You could use either private or public, okay? You don't really have to use static, okay? Static is pretty redundant, but there are some developers who want to make sure that, okay, I want a variable that is strictly defined within the context of my procedure, okay? So that's up to you. But for me, I personally don't use static that much, okay? So we have message box t. This is a static, right? This is 5. Then we're going to run x. Okay, I have to reset message box the value, right? Message box x, right? And we can just forget about dim for now, okay? We can just forget about dim, okay? And then we're going to run the code again, okay? We're going to run the code again. T equals to 5, x equals to 5. The procedure is ended. Let's run it again. Now t is equals to 10, and as you would expect, x is also 10, right? X is also 10. But if you had declared it as dim, then, it will just, the value would not be carried forward, right? It would not carry the value from the first iteration. So, but regardless, anytime when the workbook is closed or the module is reset, then the values will not be retained, okay? So everything just goes back to 0, basically, pretty much. Okay, that's about it, guys, for variable scoping, and I hope you guys have understood the ins and outs of the different types of variable. So I want you to focus mainly on public, private, and then you also have the dim, okay? Static was just an example that I pointed out just in case you see it in the future. But as I said, static is redundant, okay? Static is redundant, and that's about it. In the next lecture, we'll go into procedural scoping, okay? So another quintessential topic of Visual Basic application. Right, guys, I'll see you. Take care.